December 30th, regular meeting.
Motion made and seconded, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion made and seconded, anything to add, Michael?
No.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
I didn't say, I abstained. Public input.
Evening, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Chad Brannon, civil engineer with Fieldstone Lake Results. I was hoping that I could maybe present a couple things to the board this evening as it relates to a proposed wetland ordinance that's coming before, I think, the planning board tomorrow night. My hope is to offer some understanding about what that ordinance could result in as it relates to some of the commercial industrial properties in town. And I've been asked to come here this evening by a few of my clients to represent, how the wetlands ordinance in general, I think a setback or a buffer from the wetland is not a bad thing for a community to consider, but there's a number of ways that it can be considered that's more productive to development and growth, and primarily that in most communities are handling that regulation through a conditional use permit process rather than through a buffer, a non-disturbance buffer. 75-foot non-disturbance buffer would be a pretty significant, really almost land taking on a number of properties in town. And the town of Swanzey has a lot of low value forested wetlands, some of which have actually been altered over time. And there's really no distinction in the current proposal. It doesn't address what about existing developments. It's very onerous on existing properties as well as certainly future development. And so we have been working.
Before you open it up, what's your preference, gentlemen?
Or do we want to wait until, we have the board's meeting with their representative to the planning board in a little while, he's not here yet. Might make more sense to wait until it gets here, if we want to.
I'm happy to wait if that's,
Might be shortly after 6 o'clock or so.
that would be fine.
Great. Thank
If
you.
that makes sense.
I think it makes a lot of sense.
Before you got too far into
Sure,
it.
I appreciate
that.
We'll reconvene. Thank you.
Joe DiRusso.
Good evening. Just a follow up from the driveway request on Christian Hill Road. This food truck, since met with our contractors, this is the last meeting we had, and they're not gonna be here tonight. I don't see a reason for them to be here, but the contractor representing this food truck has indicated that they would be willing to extend the paved portion of Christian Hill Road approximately 100 feet. And they would be willing to offer to the town a formal easement for plow trucks to turn around. So essentially be just extending and maintaining the road another 100 feet. This would eliminate there having to be any issue with a private contractor, a private property owner maintaining the road. I looked at it, I met with the contractor, and I think it'd be the best circumstances as far as eliminating that issue of having somebody maintaining the town road. And before issuing the driveway permit, I want to bring it before the boards. Mentioned, I could pass a plan around. I told them not to do a design yet, just in case it wasn't approved. I didn't want to see them spend any money on it, but this is just a tax map where the contractors created a diagram which kind of shows that the pavement will be extended. The road section will be 70 feet, and then it'll be essentially 100 feet to the turn around the area. And then I explained it would require a formal easement filed with the registry of deeds. So that way there, if there was ever a change of property owner, we still would have an ability to turn the plow trucks around out there.
I went up there, I saw it, so.
Pretty straightforward. The benefit is great. Obviously, you have a formal easement to turn around the plow truck. Right now, there's no formal easement there, and property owners haven't really been issues with the turning around them, but they possibly could.
That's the driveway before that, you turn around and right?
Correct. Yeah, yeah. And they seem to be as well. I think the road construction is gonna cost them approximately $50,000-$60,000 to complete. But it'll allow them to have your driveway access and the accessory dwelling in your initial location where they want it. So I think it's a good compromise for everyone.
Gonna be the same width of the road that exists, and you can follow that way through,
Yes,
because they are gonna widen that.
yes. No motion trees.
And this new driveway that they put in, is it gonna impact drainage?
No, there's gonna be a culvert, they'll have no impact on it. In their driveway essentially, they'll just give us a formal easement to their driveway for turning around.
They go with the solution, right? You know, good.
Good job, Joe.
Thank you. That's all I have.
So you can stay the rest of the meeting if you like, that's all. If you'd like them.
Consensus.
Is that what that is? No motion.
No, consensus.
Yeah, moving forward, I'll type up a memo explaining that the 2,000 already accepted it, and we'll do those circumstances and move forward.
Hey, just like Joe said, he's looking up the Weather Hill too, and that was interesting. Have you guys seen it lately? Do you see how the layers and everything? It's pretty cool, huh? That's a lot. It's a lot more than I expected, right? Wow.
It's only a fraction of the way there, so it's.
I mean, it's time consuming, the job is from here to the window, and they gotta put the layer only 11 inches compacted from the next one, all the way up that high. I found it unbelievable. But,
Good project.
yeah, it's a big one.
And the weather hasn't been good for it. This was yesterday, the bags were freezing while they're trying to come down. We only got 2 pallets done yesterday. They've been shooting for 4 to 5. Today they had 3 done by 11 o'clock and they were going for another 3, so it was a pretty productive day for that. Yeah.
The heater that they got is just hot water on hoses, and they throw it all over the bags, and they let it sit there. It's,
But those bags weigh 70 pounds a piece, so it's carrying them from the truck, but placed by hand and off the equipment, so.
and these bags are being shipped from Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Back here. I think it's more weather. Excellent. Hopefully, thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank
You sure you don't wanna stay, Joe? I didn't good. All right, you're welcome.
Can you go on to assessing services?
Yes. So our contract with what was M&M assessing and then has been mayor's office assessing for general assessing and revaluation, we had the revaluation last year. Has expired. Initially I was leaning towards might be time to go out to bid. It's been, I think, 8 or 9 years between the two forms of the company. But checking with my colleagues, there really aren't a lot of options. The major players are Avatar and Municipal Resources, and I think from what I've heard, they're not really taking on new clients. I think one Swanzey size would be challenging. So the assessing coordinator and I met with Dave Mayor's office today to discuss some of our areas we'd like to see kind of improve. So my recommendation would be to move forward with a 1-year general assessing contract, see if we can get some of those improvements, communication, not value type things, not value issues necessarily, just in terms of administrative items. So get a little more dedicated time from the assessor in the office that we can advertise and let people know what's going to be there to answer questions. So that would be my recommendation at this point, pending the proposal, which I haven't gotten before today, so, or I haven't gotten before the meeting.
Are they willing to entertain the 1-year extension?
I think so.
And so what are the types of challenges you're hoping to overcome with in this 1 year?
Yeah, like I said, it mainly improving the timeliness of communication. So Christine is asking, hey, about this exemption application that I need your assistance with, just getting a prompt answer the first time versus having to send a reminder and then something else comes up and it gets lost track of. So I think she has done an excellent job not letting things get to a point where it is a problem, but if she wasn't as diligent, she was, I think things might have been falling through the cracks. So that would be the main thing, is just to follow up with the timeliness and having people call and say, hey, I called the number and I haven't heard back. You need to give them a call and say, you got call back.
What was the explanation for the delays?
Well, I guess there wasn't necessarily one. We're trying to focus on having the other member of the team on their partnership be the point person for us. So that, it was better when that was the case, and then that's been a little consistent at times, so it's been inconsistent in communications.
Just so I understand, it's Dave that I met the assessor guy,
Correct.
and he does have another person that works with him.
Correct.
And we wanna do an extension for a year with them.
Right.
And you just wanna see improvement on communication.
Right.
Got it.
There aren't many choices.
No, I think even when we selected, we went away from Vision and selected down here, and I think there was one of the company that did, he was based in Woodsville or April or something, so. Yeah, so,
Did we have a contract with him for so many years?
we did, we had, I think it was a 5-year contract, and then they basically, all the assessing is in 5-year cycles, because you have to do the reassessment every 5 years.
I see.
So normally you go on a 5-year cycle.
So we're just gonna, instead of doing that, we're gonna go with an extension of 1 year.
Right, with just the general assessing. So there's a general assessing, and then our revaluation last year was what's called a statistical update, which is basically they visit sale properties and places that have been improved, you know, a building permit, but they're not trying to visit necessarily every property, which is lower cost. But if you don't do that, if you don't do the visits, eventually your data is gonna be not as good.
Not
So
exactly.
usually you try to alternate. So our next one would be a full measure and list where we try to do a portion of the town each year, spread over the 3 years, and then do map update with 4 year.
How does that work? Would values change? Or this is for statistical information?
That would be to update the physical data, but the full update of the tables and everything was still happening in the last year. So if they found out you put on a shed that you did, a garage that you didn't get a permit for, you get picked up. And you get.
How did you know?
Right out there in the open, they've been to your house.
Yes, right. Well, they've worked well for us, just in general.
Mhm.
So it's been a good relationship.
You need a motion for that?
I think not at this point, because, I'll bring back the contract when we get it, and we'll approve that, so. Just consensus to not do an RFP, so.
Contracted IT services.
So this is an annual, contract that we have with Twin Bridge Services. I think normally I just sign them because it's not a long-term commitment, and it's more or less status quo, but, where this one's, there's a factor that's changing, which I mentioned in the memo. We had 2, I think, servers in the town, it was 2 total, an email server and then a file server. A year and a half ago or so, we retired the email server, and now we have the web-based mail that I think is working much better than the old version. People are actually able to make it work on their phones and different things. But part of that process was getting accounts for like Microsoft or 365 for all those email accounts, which requires an annual subscription. So the annual subscription was in the initial project to retire the email server while that first year is over. So now they're incorporated into our support contract. So there's a larger than normal increase. So probably just make me aware of that. And the year has begun, so it's moving to go in a different direction. So it's mainly just making me aware.
You planned that conveniently.
I really did, because I didn't get it till it was supposed to be in the year. But it's another thing, right? There are more options for IT services, but I think Alan's municipal specific knowledge and experience has been really critical.
That motion,
That'd be great.
I'll make that.
Second.
we can make a second to authorize the town administrator to sign a contract with Twin Bridge Services for contracted IT services for 2025. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oh, the camera's working.
That's Alan, right, that I met.
Correct. Yeah, so you're talking about the camera on the precedent there. Okay. So I don't think we've got stripes and things up, but next time you stop by.
I'll go with it. Good. Where is it? Where is the video? Is it in your office?
Right on your screen that you have, right? Because I watched it, right? And it's just a delay too, it's not too much of a delay, is it?
I don't know, so the next second later, I'm sure it's live.
Pretty cool. I watched,
Next time you're gonna drive through, maybe.
I watched it for 2 days, I sat there and brought popcorn and everything.
Did you?
Yeah, I wanted to.
Did you talk to Lisa?
We did. Yeah, we were on the speakerphone.
Yeah. So, and I haven't talked to Alan, but we probably wanna, he'll probably wanna wait till spring, but move into. Do the other ones.
What would be the next one, Michael? Would it be the one here?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. Next most travel and next most. Problematic,
Right.
so he'll probably wanna wait for warmer weather, so he's kind of wondering than the best weather, but. Would be worth looking, earth bags.
Trying to rush it. Wires hanging down.
What's our plan for this year? Are we completing the bridges? Or are we,
I think, but we have money to do the rest of them. I don't know, where slates are gonna amount higher, I don't know if you want to do that one or not, but.
Completing the restarting the cameras one? Oh. Yeah, because was this basically a test run?
no,
No, we knew. This
Well, if
is-
you wanted to do the first, you did want to do the first one, that's like a pilot, just to make sure it worked and. In case you learned anything versus improving all at once, so that part, yes, but
Hmm.
part of the whole process.
I think we should keep moving forward with them. If they're working,
Including slate.
including slate.
I think that it's going in a good direction. I know all these pictures that are going out there, but people are getting calls now and stopping from going over. I think we're going in a good direction, don't you? I think it's slowing down the activity. I think it's a lot better than what we started, before we started.
You want to show them the picture, like, you were talking about this one. That was Richard's idea, he could maybe create the bridge with showings in the past, but. Being required, said, those are on there every year, she's like, no, I look back and it hasn't been, it's been a while, so.
What am I looking at? Just to,
Cover the annual report,
oh.
it's a cover bridge, Jimmy.
I didn't know that I was supposed to be, if there was a squirrel in there or something. Yeah, that's Scott. Great. Good choice, Mike, for that was right.
Requested expenditure, design expenses related to Lower Winchester Street, West Swanzey Road project.
The last meeting, we discussed that somewhat, I won't say vague, but, letter from the city. Keen, which is outlined as project costs, which is great, we were like, is this just money, it's not, we did confirm, yes, it is. They are looking for reimbursement for our share of the design expenses, so far, which at 3% of the 20% comes to a little under $2,800 so far. And then another 7,800 expected through the rest of the design, which is currently in progress. So where this is, most of our road-based funding for town roads, this is the town road. I think the Invest in Age Affordable Housing Grant is a good miscellaneous fund. The Municipal Transportation Fund is a little bit, could be vague because it is for sidewalks, largely our part of the project is sidewalks, but. Or the sidewalk fund, so I think there are, but I think this is some other options, I think this is the claims option. So we'll be for that on here, about 11,000.
What's a lot of?
For the current invoice and
Yeah,
then the rest of it.
So this would approve the balance? The full 10.5, 10.6?
I make the motion.
Second.
We should move seconded to authorize the expenditure of up to 11. Us to
Good catch.
11,000 for design work associated with Lower Winchester Street Route 10 redesign project from the end of NH per unit grant. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Yeah, that's it. West Swansea 5th District Development Plan.
So it's not in the email packet, 'cause it was kind of down to the wire, but included in here, it's about 10 pages. You don't have to review it all, but it all should be very familiar. Starts on
What page did it start on then?
28. So I think this is something we need to go with the hearing we have next week as part of the budget warrant hearing, so it's basically the development plan. So Adam did a lot of work on it, so they sent it to Mr. Biddle to review it, and said it looked good, he had a couple questions, but overall, I think it's pretty good, so. As part of this process, we have to let the school district and the county know about it, because in theory, it's kind of keeping some revenue away from them for a little while, so I mentioned that Jeremy Rathburn met with him on Monday. Other things, and mentioned this, he's generally aware of it, we don't have a copy of this, now it's pretty well drafted.
Is that something that we just have to make them aware of, or do they have?
They don't have
They don't have no say.
You don't have to approve it, they can provide feedback, but it's
Yeah,
not,
but we have to make them aware. Because it cuts down money,
that will go to them for.
it's going for the sales. And Billy, we did talk about extending the gas park and, but we're gonna use it because we can add later. If we really had to.
We're gonna close it tomorrow.
Hmm?
Supposedly
Yes.
closing tomorrow.
Is that right?
I don't know anything about the weekends, but surprised me. It'll be with fire surprise. Seriously,
Yeah.
on water?
Sure, so I had a call with Cordell yesterday to go over the draft warrant. No major change, a couple minors. Well, actually, one kind of major issue, but so Article 12 on here, we have page 51. Been mentioning that, how much work we needed, and that's what we do, so since the county board create a water fund, to service an enterprise fund with county board expenses and revenues related to municipal drinking water. Be contingent with the funding for the purchase improvement system. The other wrinkle to this is there's a statute specific to acquiring water utilities, which I have no idea. And those articles have few specific kind of, it's not requirements, but caveats, so they have to be a 2/3 vote. Which raises the bar, and can't be brought back for consideration for, I believe, 2 years. So it's not like you can keep bringing it back. So just something to be aware of there, so it's not updated as 2/3 on here, so we both wanted to review the statute and then discuss.
So which one is the 2/3?
Article 12. To basically acquire. Yeah, I don't know if it'll actually be, it might look differently next time you see it, but to adopt a water, to accept a water. Yes, buy a water. Requires a 2/3 vote.
Can you break that down for me a little better? Jen?
It's just a higher threshold, so it needs to get like 67% of voter support.
Yeah, I understand that, so we just need to do that because we're starting to nitpick, yeah.
Yeah, it's just something specific to acquire water.
Right.
Article 5 is 3/5, Article 12 is 2/3.
Right. Unless there's, and that's just what we're gonna both kind of research and connect back, unless there's a way we can somehow combine, cover them both. He thought we still had to have two, but, yeah, I know it's kind of weird. Have the two different ones with different thresholds.
So if Article 5 fails,
We won't be doing 12.
Right.
if Article 5 passes and Article 12 fails, then what do we do?
We have 2 years
We
We can buy
to
it,
create a water.
we can buy it, right? Based on Article 5,
I would need to check the fine print of that water. I don't know if you can buy it and not operate it, or.
that's what leads to the question.
What if 12 passes, what if 5 passes?
But why wouldn't, if Article 5 passes, why wouldn't Article 12?
Could you go from 60% to 67?
Oh, yeah, that's right, it's a big. Really, that was a good question.
Gee, just in case. Well, I hope people understand how critical it is. Just for the people that are on the system. Never mind the ones we want to add.
Yeah, it goes through.
Mhm.
Well,
A lot of wells.
a lot of water.
No, a lot of wells, they don't have to drill.
Oh, yeah.
You know, somebody else could buy it.
But who else is stepping in to just diminish what we have? Because it's so less.
But in the meantime, you can probably do it.
What's that? I don't think so. The other piece, and of course, it didn't come through as highlighted. Article 14, there was a pretty decent section in the middle. Could be, we want to make this shorter.
The exception so shall be granted.
Yeah. We want to make it shorter, because a lot of it's redundant, because we're readopting it, so. We could, we want to shorten it, which I know usually we try to shorten it if we can. The 14 is the commercial and industrial tax exemption. Sooner, so it's the starting of the second sentence, the intent of the exemption is to provide incentives, et cetera, and then ending after. Board of Selectmen for the purpose of it.
And then you have to take all that out.
We could, so if you think it's helpful to have it in there, we can keep it. If you want to make it as short as we can.
You can put it in the voting guide, over.
We can put it.
I think we should take it out and put it in the voter guide.
I think it's important for people to understand we have it. And it's, hasn't been utilized all that much, but it, if we're able to count for them, that's 72, or 790, sorry.
That one hasn't been utilized at all.
I thought 790 was here.
No, they were also, they were this one.
There was
This one was.
somebody who-
$1 probably we were able to. Is that what your report shows?
Yeah.
The report asks Christine to put together what we got out there for exemptions and credits. That's fiscal year 24, right? Or
Yeah.
encompassing the tax rate.
Should be for, yeah, 24. Yeah. But, well, that would be the tax rate was for 24.
Better shape than Keene.
The exemption capital of Winchester County. And then one other where you can put Article 15, which is the petition article about 5 selectmen. That language is prescribed, meaning we got a petition for that,
That's it.
we got set wording, so even though the petition said something somewhat different. That's prescribed. Got some legal advice on that.
So this doesn't alter what the petitioners want. This is just language that's
If you
already.
if the town receives a petition trying to amend, trying to change the number of selectmen, the statute says this is what it will say. The other, one of the other petition articles, whether it has an appropriation, I will at some point need a recommendation from the selectmen. Either now or before we finalize the warrant.
What type of recommendation?
In favor or not. Because the appropriating the select board is probably either recommend or not. So like the Fed selectmen is not a dollar.
Do we have to do either one?
Not
The money.
Yeah, not the 5 selectmen. But the other one.
Anything to do because of the monies involved in 16?
Correct.
Is it before or after the budget hearing?
Either way, whenever you-
Deliberative?
before deliberative, it has to be on the warrant.
So that would be.
But then we also have the opportunity at deliberative after the change. If there's a demonstrative change.
Correct, correct, you could change your recommendations for the ballot.
But going into it, there needs to be an indicator. And then afterward, just like with all the other body articles.
Right.
Oh, like it's cold.
Pretty easy here to see what's in there. We have to get everything warm up too. I did, I don't want to go. But on the budget, I did give you a new printout. Dated snapshot.
Does it include the update?
Yes. You don't have one of these?
Let's leave that. By Rich. No.
So the largest increases, which will probably be no surprise, but DPW, primarily paving and outside labor related, additional position is up about 140,000. 140,000, police department up about 135,000. Fire department with the additional part-time hours up 73,000. Insurance would be increases up about 70,000. And personnel administration, which is kind of all the retirement employee related costs, up about 82,000. One thing I was discussing with Teresa that can help decrease a little bit is next year is a 53 pay period year, but based on the vacant positions and that the wage increases don't go until later in the year, we can have that time, which is pay 60 to 75,000 spread throughout departments, so it really be noticeable probably anywhere except maybe the personnel admin one, but we'll get this down. So with the fringe benefits, probably about 75,000. General, did I say general assistance? General assistance is up about 65. City of Fire.
Which page is it on?
Twenty-one, three. Yeah, right. Zero, four, 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 one, four, 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 one, 440 is the big.
Oh, I see it. Isn't it the real issue?
These numbers for actuals are through November. And we're still facing December. So we usually use November at the budget hearing and then end of year for delivery.
That's it in a nutshell.
March 13. The table.
We're good.
If you got feedback.
Even though it's $6, but they meant to make 6,000 last year, it was 6, but it's by about 99,000.
Oh, so it did.
Yeah.
I got you. Okay.
So it looks like it's a good way to check if people are paying attention.
And what was that?
You can sit anywhere you like.
Well, it's only 5 or 6,000, so it's the.
Not much.
I was on this and Chad and Charlie.
Come on up, Charlie.
So they got the honor seat.
We gotta reach you.
Oh, I'm over there.
Jeez.
Well, like I kind of mentioned to you, we're a little overdue to check in and see how things, you've been the board's representative for the planning board for about 8 months or 8 or 9 months so far, so probably just wanted to do a check-in. And then Mr. Brandon started talking a little bit earlier, we decided to put on pause, but some items related to the wetlands buffer that he wanted to make, just for aware of, and then obviously you as their representative on the planning board.
We just going over that stuff and, I think they wanna leave it up to the town to vote on the wetland stuff. Other than that, not much going on as far as I know.
How's the experience been on the board?
Nothing large.
Yeah. Is it something you'd like to continue with next year?
I don't know.
What are the reservations?
I don't know. It's a little above me.
You're a big guy.
Yeah, which means it's pretty.
But when I talked with you, it seems like you've been interested in it.
I was, but I don't know. It's not what I was expecting. Like I said, there's a lot to learn. You can't just, to me, you can't just go there cold. I'm over there cold.
But next year you'd be a veteran.
Oh, yeah.
You got a couple of months to think about
Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing
it. Yeah.
it. What do you got for us, Chad?
Sure. So good evening again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Chad Brandon, civil engineer with Fieldstone Land Consultants. And I've been asked to attend this evening's meeting to talk about some of the wetlands, some of the ramifications of the wetlands ordinance as it currently exists for a number of my clients, but also I think in large part as an impact to the community. And I will say that generally speaking, you know, our firm is a multidisciplinary firm. We have 32 employees, many of them licensed professionals, soil scientists, wetland consultants, civil engineers, surveyors. And so when we look at regulations, we try to be as objective as possible. There's always a goal and objective that a community is trying to accomplish. And then there's balance with development. There always has to be a balance. And I think that currently your wetlands, proposed wetlands ordinance has no balance. It doesn't really contemplate development at all across community. And what I mean by that is if you look at the way the ordinance is written, I think there's a lot of good things and clearly a lot of hard work that's gone into the material that's been put together, but I think it's missing some key components that are really going to have a negative impact on development in this community. And I want to go over a number of those situations. But when you look at a wetlands ordinance, generally speaking, there's two ways that it can be established. It can be established in your zoning, or it can be established as a conditional use permit through the planning board. We're seeing a trend across the state where the wetlands are really evaluated at the planning level because the planning board is looking at designs that are more advanced and you can start to look at more details to accomplish goals and objectives, whether it's low impact development, you know, different design features, etc. The ordinance as it currently exists simply says it's a 75-foot no disturbance buffer, period. It says all wetlands. Period. It's the only exception it makes is to the fourth order wetlands, which would be Swanzey Lake, the rivers, Wilson Pond. It doesn't apply the most stringent conditions to the most high functioning, you know, wetlands in town, which is somewhat interesting, you know, kind of unconventional, but that's fine. What most wetland regulations will have in it are provisions. There's, you know, permitted uses, and it'll list what's permitted. And then there's uses that would be permitted by special exception. And it would list a number of uses there. And then it would have uses that are absolutely unpermitted, like bulk storage of fuel, hazardous materials, things like that. always restricted within a wetlands buffer. The special exception piece, if you're gonna keep it in the zoning, is critical because that's where you would want to contemplate things like access to somebody's property. Right now, your regulation is written where it would restrict somebody the ability to access an isolated buildable area. So let's say there's a wetland along a roadway. This condition happens a lot in communities. That wetland needs to be crossed in order to access a couple acres, 50 acres, 100 acres, whatever, you know, the property may be. Right now, your regulations don't contemplate that. It simply says that there's a 75-foot buffer that's to be applied to all wetlands. When you think about that, it's actually 150 feet, depending on where that wetland is situated, because it's a 75-foot buffer on one side, 75-foot buffer on the other side. And that would require variance. Variances generally are the hardest thing in permitting to obtain. You have to go before the zoning board. You have to make a case that it's not contrary to the spirit of the public, of the spirit of the ordinance. That's a really hard test to argue when a town adopts a brand new ordinance. Because the assumption is if the town adopts it, then this is what they're trying to stop. And so it's an unintended consequence. That's why normally you would see access under special exception, under a use that's permitted by special exception. A special exception lists a completely different set of standards, and if you meet them, it's a permitted use by right as long as you meet these conditions. And so the ordinance as it's proposed is void of that process. It also is unclear how that's going to impact existing properties because it doesn't contemplate anything. It says all wetland buffers. It doesn't say all new development or how it's to be imposed on existing properties, and it limits mowing of lawns. You know, there's a lot of people who have existing lawn areas that go within a 75-foot buffer or 75 feet of a wetland area. That's a very onerous regulation. Typically, vegetated areas, as long as you're using, you know, no pesticides or things like that, would be allowed. There's a lot of small lots in town that could impose, you know, a real burden on. But what I wanted to show is, you know, this town adopted their last PIP district was Safford Drive, and we've done a lot of development on Safford Drive as a company. Brickstone's done, you know, a number of things, and Jim Fippert on Safford Drive. But recently we've finally been able to do a few site plans out there, and then we have John Flatley doing that residential project. None of these would have happened with this regulation. Would not have happened at all. And I just want to point out, like, this is Safford Drive down here. This is the north side of the property, so you have Route 12 would be up on this northern section. So Safford Drive goes by the Cheshire Fairgrounds. Property starts here, just to give everybody some orientation. And you have Wilson Pond Road right here. We just secured, or I shouldn't say just, it's almost been a year, secured the contractor-based storage facility approval on this property on this north eastern section. If he doesn't start pouring foundations or something soon, he's up for an extension, an approval extension. Does that happen if this new ordinance gets adopted? Because his buildable envelope here wouldn't even allow one of these buildings. Because your regulation doesn't allow any parking. It's very onerous. Most communities are moving to a conditional use permit process before the planning board. They might have a non-disturbance buffer that's 20, 25 feet, but you're allowed to do certain things outside of that. And the conditional use permit process is more like a special exception where it outlines the goals and objectives, which are important. And I'm not suggesting that a wetlands ordinance isn't something that the community should be contemplating, but I think it's something that really needs to be reviewed in a lot more detail and such. All of the yellow highlighted area here represents that 75-foot buffer. So what does that mean? It basically means this plan would have never happened. And you know, there would be maybe a really small building envelope there, and these aren't large buildings. But you could have maybe 1 or 2 bay contractor bay facility here with the new ordinance. As you go down and work your way, west on Safford Drive, coming down this way, we have one buildable area here, but very restricted. There's not a lot of width here, and you can't do anything in the yellow anymore.
And you couldn't even get to it. am I
Can't
correct?
get, then you can't get to this one. And then we're actively in the process of doing another commercial building here. And this regulation, quite honestly, jeopardizes this area from even being buildable. It takes it right off the tax rolls. Sadly, it's even worse on the other side of Stafford Drive. So you have a TIF district in town that you have all the municipal utilities out here, but there's a potential to not, you know, we might be done on Stafford Drive with this regulation. This is the other side. We again did a site plan for gridiron construction here that's approved. There is a buildable envelope on the south side, but we would have had to cross this, you know, buffer area before. You know, so that would still be buildable there. These areas here, these white areas here, those are forested wetlands. Like this area is pretty wet through this section. But there's buildable area back here, and the only way to get there is coming across that wetland in a couple areas. And we've looked at that. We're actually, you know, we were gonna start subdividing this and trying to make it more marketable for 3 or 4 commercial lots. But this regulation really poses a great danger to, you know, to this property. Another property that we've been working on is Paul Thomas's property off of Route 12. We have all the existing conditions survey done. This is Arrow Crest Drive here. Got Twinkletown, the golf and ice cream shop here. This is all commercial industrial property. He's got an existing parking lot here that goes inside the buffer. What happens to that? It's kind of, how is somebody going to enforce that? Does he have to now take that area out? But all of this yellow is area that he wouldn't be able to do anything with. It's gone in the regulation. It's a land taking, quite honestly. And I think it does put the town in a position of some liability eventually. And you can see this concept. We've had this concept done with Mr. Thomas for some time. He, you know, his busy season just ended. He came into our office and said, hey, I'd like to go forward with this plan finally. And now we have this regulation that's looming. And it takes everything that he was planning and really puts it in jeopardy. So he was looking at a couple commercial buildings out back. And this would be the active area where the parking would be. This is the shed, the place that sells sheds currently is here. So that would be the buildable envelope on that piece, you know, if this regulation passed. I just think that this regulation has a lot of unintended consequences. It doesn't mean that it can't exist, but I think it needs to exist with a conditional use permit process or a special exception process where somebody can say, hey, yeah, we want to go into the buffer and we're willing to advance the design. We're going to do infiltration. We're going to do advanced treatment. We're going to do, you know, some best management practices and try to balance those goals and objectives rather than just saying, no, it's off the table. And this regulation currently written says it's off the table. And I think, you know, my clients have asked me to come before the select board because they frankly want the select board to write a letter not supporting this regulation to the planning board. Because I think there's unintended consequences here that really need to be considered strongly. You know, even, you know, this is just, you know, the fire station we were working on, it's not severely impacted, but there's a wetland that goes down along the property line. This would be that 75-foot buffer. You know, technically, we wanted two access points. We'd have to modify, you know, that layout and work on that too. this discussion internally in our office has been happening over, basically this week and a little bit of last week. When we started, discussing this with a couple of our clients. I can assure you that these are just small examples of, 3 projects that we've been looking at in the community, but there will be much larger impacts. I can tell you, we're looking at another gas station in town that has the potential to be compromised. There's development on Route 10 that we were reviewing with people, and when this happens, when regulations get posted, things get put on hold. They have to stop because we have to see how, these are gonna work out, and nobody wants to be the first one in, so it has a real burden on local economics and people going forward. Don't think the regulation is a bad idea, I just think it's being carried forward in the wrong format. And it's really important for us to share that. Our office isn't in this community, but we live in this community, and we want to make sure that things are done right. Many of our clients, have done own property, not only own property in town, but Swanzey in large part has done a lot of great things over the last few years, and I think this would be kind of a move in the wrong direction under the current format. So that's what I have. I mean, I'm not here looking for an approval like I normally am, but I certainly think and hope that the board will consider a letter of non-recommendation to the planning board. They're meeting tomorrow night. I can't attend that meeting, so I told my clients I could at least attend tonight's meeting. I may have another representative from our office go tomorrow evening, but to the planning board meeting. The unfortunate part about this presentation is I really do think there's a lot of great ideas and concepts in the regulation. It's just not, doesn't offer good balance, right? It's very much on a no development standpoint. It doesn't contemplate options for people. Somebody wanted to build a building here, has to go before the zoning board for a variance. That's a hard burden if it's a new regulation. And we've had a couple unfortunate cases in this town when they adopted new regulations where zoning board members have just said the presentation makes sense, but it's a new regulation, so how can you make the argument that it meets the spirit and intent of the ordinance? It can't in their mind. And I understand that side of it, but regulations are not written for all properties. It's a paint, broad brush. So you got to speak to individual sites. I think it's worth considering. I hope you'll consider it, and I'm happy to answer any questions if the board may have any relative to this topic. I will say that when I read the summary of the regulation, it touches on a number of communities and saying that Swansea is the minority, but it's misleading. And, for example, they bring up Keene. Keene has a 75-foot buffer in their rural ag areas. They do. It's a conditional use permit. And so we're allowed to work with that with the planning board. They also have a reduced buffer in their downtown district and commercial industrial districts. Maybe Swansea should consider that rather than wiping out a TIF district, which is what this would do. You have all the utilities there, nobody will be able to use them. It would be what I would consider unintended consequence. I don't think anybody has evaluated this section in town. Troy is the same thing, conditional use permit, Jaffrey, conditional use permit. They're all mentioned in here as they have a buffer. They do, but they have special exceptions or conditional use permit. Nobody has a regulation that I'm aware of that can't do anything in a buffer. They're open to liability at that point. I think there would be lawsuits. There would have to. If the zoning board said no, that's the only option. And so it lines things up in the wrong direction, in my opinion.
Did you say you're gonna send somebody tomorrow night?
I'm going to try to. It was a last minute request, and so I'm hoping to send one of our other engineers there. Yes.
And they'll be able to do something similar.
Yeah, they plan on having them bring this forward and present the same material. I may have one of my wetland scientists go. And again, mean, I think there's good intentions. But unintended consequences, the way it's currently written, there needs to be some more thought put into how to balance development as well. And landowners' rights, it doesn't, could be anybody. You know, another driveway or an accessory dwelling unit. I mean, people are stuck with many people are stuck with the properties they have. And they don't even realize that wetland is just inside the woods. You add 75 feet to that, your whole lawn's a buffer. Can't put an addition on to accommodate an accessory dwelling unit. I think there's just gotta be a process for somebody to ask for relief that's not a variance.
Chad. Back to the fire station that you're working on. Would that add cost to that development of the fire station?
It would change the layout, so it would, you know, it could add cost, or we'd have to do a retaining wall and that would add cost. I mean, there's always. Can you do something different? Maybe, but it even redesigning it adds cost, so. What's that?
I said, we know that.
Shut the free that one out.
Yes, for sure. They don't have to leave them, but we always have.
Bill, from your comments from last meeting, is that paralleling what he said? Am I reading that right, from how you felt last meeting?
Very similar. Because
Okay.
I backed off a few days later after I read through everything. And then I went back and read the proposed amendments and right back to what I was saying last week, which is much better said by Chad, but it wipes out Safford Drive. And my point with Safford Drive was the town made an investment in Safford Drive. It made that investment in the late 90s. We can all argue whether that was a good place for an industrial park or not, but back then that was the decision. And that bond is about to be paid off. And as Chad mentioned, that bond put Safford Drive in, it put the utilities in, and now we're done.
And
the proposal of Todd Van Olson's, that's a very unobtrusive project. It's whatever, there's 3 or 4 9,000 square foot buildings that would be contractor based, totally unobtrusive, wouldn't be able to be done. And I'm the one that Chad referred to with regard to the new ordinance coming in, because we changed the density requirement in the business zone twice. And Chad came.
I was trying to stay away from.
I know,
Bill
but
told me no.
whatever. But I said, to him, how can we do this? It's reasonable, but how could the board find a rational reason for doing it when the town's just changed its density requirement? And that's the same situation that the zoning board would be in here. What I would appreciate if you could just expound on the state regulations with regard to wetlands, because that part was not really presented to us, and I'm not totally aware of how the state is involved in protection of wetlands currently.
Sure, so the state does not have a wetland buffer. The state has well, I shouldn't say that. On any wetlands that your ordinance would apply to, the state doesn't have a wetland buffer. They have jurisdiction over the wetland itself. And so, for example, we were looking at an 80,000 square foot industrial bay building on this site this year. We were hoping it was going to go forward, but the water pressures didn't support the sprinkler system in that location. But we were going to fill this wetland peninsula to create, this area. And the state has processes for that, where if you fill over 3,000 square feet of wetlands, you have to do mitigation. And so you either do on-site mitigation, or you do compensatory, or you do an in lieu fee where that money would be spent in the same watershed. And your current regulations would get in the way of that, because there would be a variance process required. And so what I mean by that is, many local regulations say if you're going to get a state permit for a wetland impact, it's allowed by special exception, because you're going through a permitting process at the state that's going to evaluate the functions and values of that wetland system. Your regulation doesn't address that. Maybe the other thing that the state really gets involved in is the shoreline protection. which is the fourth order, water bodies. So Swanzey Lake, Wilson Pond, you know, the rivers. There's a 250-foot, shoreline zone that is associated with those water bodies or those wetlands. The state has a 50-foot setback where you can't build any primary structures. But you can put an accessory structure within 50 feet. Your regulations exempts these high-end water bodies and defers that to the state. But the state's regulations are less stringent than the regulations that you're proposing, which is 75 feet, no impacts. So a perfect example is, you know, Swanzey Lake, people are always, they have water access down to the water, there's a path, there's often a lawn. There's, you know, maybe a patio down there, all of those are allowed within the 50-foot setback. The building, the house, the structure, the primary structure has to be set back 50 feet. You're right, the current proposal for the wetland regulation would be 75, so. For whatever reason, your wetland regulation pulls back from those fourth order and says, hey, we're gonna leave this part up to the state under the shoreline permit. But you're applying a more stringent regulation to a less functioning wetland, a wetland with less functions and values. I mean, these wetlands on Stafford Drive, there are some good ones. There's a couple ponds in there, out in the woods and back. But most of them are just forested, you know, wetland where, you know, the water's just been channelized a little bit. Some of them have been, you know, altered many years ago. And they're just, you know, kind of conduits from, you know, for the stormwater. We're applying a 75-foot setback to that. You know, that doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, in some communities, you do a functions and values assessment on the wetland, and based on the function and value of the wetland, there's different setbacks that you apply. So if it's a vernal pool, very high functioning wetland, it's a 100-foot setback. But all other wetlands might be 25, 50, and then there's a conditional use permit process. I think this is a very onerous regulation, the way it's currently written. You know, I would say I've been doing designs in New Hampshire for 25 plus years. This might be one of the more stringent regulations, you know, that I could think of. Hollis, like town of Hollis, I think is the only other one that might be more. It's actually not even more stringent. They have a special exception process in there. This year, they're moving it to a conditional use permit process, so I take that back. I don't know if that answers your questions or if
Jack, please try to get somebody there tomorrow at the planning board meeting, so this information can be imparted, so people have better understanding what's going on.
I'll try.
I think we should, I really think on the Saffron Park Drive, we should use some common sense on that. Since those lots have been there for a long time, and try our best to get those developed.
I think that's what Chet was saying, but the proposed amendments don't contemplate that. The contemplation that we object, or I objected to, is what Chad brought up, is it's this concept that you can just go to the zoning board and get a variance. You can't just go to the zoning board and get a variance. So it really puts I think as Chad said, there's great intent, there's a great deal of knowledge and a lot of work that's been put into it. It just needs to go the next step. And I think that's what Chad is talking about. And we haven't even talked about, other than Chad and a couple of comments, enforcement. How would it be enforced? Just to give you the example of what I used last week of my current house. Under this, I can't mow my lawn. Now, if I hadn't been here, I wouldn't know that. If I checked off the box and said, yeah, that makes sense to me, and I keep mowing my lawn and somebody doesn't like me and they report me to the town, what happens then? Or my old house where I wouldn't have been able to build my garage. So I couldn't have built my garage because I would have needed a permit. So.
No, that's why I'm saying some common sense should be.
But it's not contemplated here.
No.
So, but again, I think the emphasis, as Chad said, this is all good work. And it's something that we should embrace and try to work with. But we just need to take it to the next step, so that we don't lose a Safford Drive.
That's what I'm getting to, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I brought up Keene for a reason. I mean, Keene's not often an example I'll bring up in Swanzey, but I will say the downtown district, they have a 30-foot buffer requirement, the rural ag, they have a 75. The reality is both of those are a conditional use permit, so we're doing a 36 unit development in Keene right now. And the Conservation Commission supports the impacts. And we're in front of the planning board getting, we have wetland crossings, we have areas that we want to get into the buffer. And then we have areas that we're giving more buffer where the wetland is more important and it hasn't been altered. And the conditional use permit process allows us to have that constructive dialogue with the community. You go on a site walk, we take a look at it, and we create a design for the property. It's not just, these are the regulations and they're applied to everybody. And so that's kind of a more common sense approach, and I think that's a good way to say it. The conditional use permit process allows the boards and the town to adjust designs to a piece of property, because every property is different, while still adhering to the goals and objectives of this ordinance. And I would strongly encourage that that's the process that Swanzey considers. I've done a lot of projects in town over the years, and most, if not all of them, have had wetlands. Almost all of Route 12, I think of all the properties, the wetlands is like right in the woods, back of these properties. And I know there's other parcels that, we work on concepts, and it takes people a long time to, kind of generate the energy to go forward with something. But there's, it does have the potential to have a negative impact on good development. I appreciate, everybody's time, and I know my clients would appreciate some consideration if the select board can make a recommendation to the planning board that, maybe this regulation is good, but it falls short in some areas, and there needs to be more time. Because that's, in our opinion, very factual. We hope that you consider that.
Do you have any specifics that you would want the board to address? And that if it chose to move that direction?
Well, I think what's important for, professionally is that there's balance, right? I do think that the regulation contemplates a lot of good ideas, but it doesn't contemplate a special exception process. It doesn't contemplate or a conditional use permit process. And so it stops development in its tracks. And that generally is not, it's an unintended consequence. They've focused on preservation and conservation, but haven't recognized, all of the conditions that could exist. And there's many. It's like we said, this existing site, the existing site across the road, all of the approvals that this town has given that hasn't reached the point of vesting. This regulation has the potential to impact. So it's not just developments coming forward. So I just think that the regulation as it's drafted it doesn't contemplate all the, the circumstances and it has unintended consequences. And I think that's the terminology that I would recommend using, because the last thing I want to do is, degrade anybody's efforts. I think there's a lot of good time put here, and many of these regulations can exist in their existing format, but there needs to be additional things. Like someone has to have the ability to access the property. The state cannot deny a permit for access to this piece. It's illegal for the state to deny a permit for someone to access upland areas. The town probably should have regulations that acknowledge that as well. These do not.
So one comment, and chat among the conservation committee as well as the planning board, so you can see the alignment, right?
Yes.
And I appreciate you coming here. You make a lot of good points, a lot of valid points. You know, a lot of times leaving the decision up to the planning board has its own consequences, right? I mean, we're supposed to be smart on everything, but usually this parcel right here, you have us. You know, I'm also president of the Wilson Pond Association. We do the water testing. The worst water we get comes down from a stream from this area. I don't know if it's coming from Homestead, fertilizing their lawn. I have no idea where it's coming from, but that's the worst water. And we don't know that. So in that process, if it was conditional permitting or whatever from the planning board, that really needs to be taken to heart, right? Because that needs to get mitigated somewhere along the way, as opposed to just putting some more stuff here that might be leaching or feeding into the wetlands that are coming down into that stream. The stream's only this big, you know, but it's the worst water that we get into Wilson Pond. So, you know, I'm not saying one way or the other, and people might think because I'm on conservation committee, I'm leaning one way or the other. I've been taking all the information in, and I've gotten reactions from this board as well as people in the town for me to process and consider. But I do appreciate you coming here and making those points. It's a shame those points weren't made prior to that amendment being written.
Yeah, and we're happy, I mean, I'll tell you, I mean, we have an office locally, we're happy to meet with the Conservation Commission or Planning Board and talk about, you know, the regulations and share ideas and concepts of where things can improve. I mean, I will say, a lot of the sites that we design things to meet state standards. Alteration of terrain standards, so behind the alteration of terrain permit is a Clean Water Act certification. So if you're designing something to meet the qualitative and quantitative treatment practices that the state requires, that development will not typically have a negative impact on surrounding areas. A lot of communities are adopting those state standards on a local level from a design standpoint to try to address concerns that you're having. That could happen collectively as part of a conditional use permit. So if you're looking to impact the buffer area, you have to design your stormwater practices to meet state standards. But you can do things like that. We see that, and that's kind of a transition in a lot of communities, because I definitely don't discount the concerns. I think there's a lot of common goals and objectives. As a designer, we do that just because, you know, frankly, we can lean on those regulations and say, you know, when we have people speaking in opposition to a project, we can say, well, this is, you know, being designed to meet these standards. But technically in town, we don't have to design all projects to, you know, to meet those. So there's a lot of places that the regulations can be improved. You know, we just think it probably needs a little bit more time because the unintended consequences here. At least I think, I mean, I'm assuming they're definitely unintended because there's so many moving pieces with regulations that it's hard to hit it, you know, get it right, you know, the first time.
Yeah, one of the other things, the point with agriculture as well as residential is the chemicals people use for the fuels for the lawns, right? I mean, that's certainly dangerous to the watershed. I was a little bit surprised for you said, I think a 30-foot buffer for commercial industrial, I think you're talking about Keene. That surprises me because the risk of industrial itself, you know. You know, it's a balance, and maybe the conditional use permitting is a way to do it. Special use, permitted use. I mean, you try to define as much as you can, but you don't ever seem to catch it all, right?
Yeah, and I think part of the critical thing that you look at is it's balancing goals and objectives, right? So you have an area in town where you want more density because you have the infrastructure. It sometimes means that those areas require a little bit more design. So state standard design, stuff like that. And a lot of times in the commercial industrial areas, we're doing closed drainage. So we're bringing all the drainage internal, treating it before we're discharging it. So it's not that drainage or that stormwater is discharging only over a 30-foot buffer. When it's discharged, it's clean. And so the design intensity is the design practices are more elevated in those areas, and so, but the communities understand that this is where we want the development and where we've invested, money in the past, and so it's again finding that balance. But yeah, no,
Thank you.
don't doubt that. And a lot of those issues are coming off of the roads, frankly, getting into the stream. Often where the problems lie.
That was a lot of information, Chad. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
The catcher here one.
But after we become, unannounced.
Or even announced.
That good information to be Mark?
Oh, information good.
Yeah, but did that change you at all in some of your thoughts? I'm just curious, because,
I mean,
because I'll tell you, it affected me by listening to that. I mean, I just wondered if you,
You can't, you have to be very careful that you don't
it's more
do
information.
an ex parte type of statement about opinion. Or an omission. That we're gonna be voting on tomorrow. I'm gonna be very careful.
got it.
Well, I think I've been very open, and I think it's a lot of good work that's been done, and I think it does make sense for us to weigh in and just on behalf of the community and utilize some of the language that Jack mentioned with regard to continuing the process to bring in an opportunity for release, so it doesn't necessarily become a taking. I know with both of those projects are planning something, but they know exactly what's going to happen if Safford Drive gets wiped off the map, and that's not going to be pretty. And it doesn't need to be, because I think Chad's absolutely correct that there's been a tremendous amount of good work put into the effort and the spirit of protecting wetlands. It just needs further expansion to be able to bring in relief, whether it's a conditional use permit or a special exception, so that the town shows that they're contemplating uses. And I think it's great work. I think it's an excellent start. I think they're 40 to 50% there for where they need to be. And my hope is that the planning board will, I don't know what the procedure is, but essentially withdraw their support for going on the warrant this year and make a concerted effort to bring in people like Chad and other land use consultants and attorneys and get a sense of what other communities are doing. Because I didn't have the data to be able to object to that page showing Dublin with X amount of feet in Richmond and Troy and all that, but I knew Keene didn't have a 75-foot buffer that was black and white. I just didn't know what the remedy is, and Chad explained that, and I think we should have something like that as well, so that people have the opportunity. Doesn't mean they're going to get it, but if they meet the criteria, and it's a contemplated use, which is what a special exception is. It just gives an extra level of review, which would be the same with the conditional use permit. It's a contemplated use, but they still have to meet these conditions. If they meet them, they get it. If they don't, they don't. So the one comment I made to Sherry that I wish would be able to have been done was that this was brought forward in October, and I wish that they had understood that the same as the fire station did, that it was important to bring it to the board to get feedback. And I understand they ran out of time. And so I just don't want to come across as saying it doesn't have merit, because there's a lot of merit and has a lot of benefit. But my main concern of this, if it goes through, is the fact that it shuts down development. People don't understand. And then we get into the same thing as we got into with the septic systems. Why are you 125 feet when the state's 75? I don't know. Why do you have 75 foot buffer when nobody else has a 75 foot non-disturbed buffer? I don't know, but that's what the people voted on. So this would give an opportunity if they took an additional year to expand on it and bring in other viewpoints and help put forth an amendment that really is workable and enforceable. You're always open to litigation. This, we know, is an open door to litigation. So I would support drafting a paragraph to the planning board.
Want to work with Michael on it?
Sure. I don't know about that.
Homework, Mike. I think we probably want to keep Adam out of it.
Okay.
Just so he doesn't,
You, Jimmy, and Mike.
You slide, I'm gonna go right
I'm
now.
gonna see you tomorrow. Sorry.
Um, I think this is too big to push too fast, as simple as that. I mean, I think there's a lot to think about here. I think this is a big thing that we need more time, more looking into. Like you said, just what you said, more exceptions and all this, and it's a lot to this, to just vote on it now. I think it should definitely be investigated a lot more.
You've done great work.
I think it's a great idea, and I'm all for conservation, but we gotta be reasonable there. We just can't push something like this through. It's gonna affect a lot of people, a lot of town, a lot of money. We're talking about a lot. I think it's a big area, a big situation. I'm gonna recommend the same thing you are.
So you're gonna work with us on it?
I will.
Thank you. Good job, Slide, defer it.
I think your idea is good, that, by extending it, I think that also, it may eliminate the petitioner going that extra step to the zoning board, you know what I mean?
Or if they did, it would be for a special exception, right?
Right.
So it would be a contemplated use, but additional review, like the conditional use permit for the planning board.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Chad.
I did want to just add one more piece. Part of the reason why the conditional use permit is so is the path that we're seeing a lot of these projects go, our communities go in when it pertains to wetlands and use inside of a buffer area is at the conditional use permit stage, you're seeing more design. So you see the grading, you see the stormwater management. At a zoning level, people are wondering whether they are turning, if this is a viable project or not. And so you don't see enough details often at that stage. Whereas when you're going for a conditional use permit, you're working with the town planner. And normally that conditional use permit process involves a meeting and site walk sometimes with the Conservation Commission, and the Conservation Commission has an ability to offer comments on a project. And so it's more interactive. And so it's often not a no. It doesn't mean the Conservation Commission is going to support the project, but it offers an ability for, some give and take.
Yeah.
And that process is productive when it comes to, we make the case with our clients, often on the backside of the project that the project is often better at the end, because it balances a lot of people's feedback. But the zoning board process is black and white. And so there's no ability to have a conversation, to walk the site, to talk with the Conservation Commission, to talk with the planner. And so I think that, communities that are pro-development, which Swanzey has always come across being that way, in my professional opinion, lean to that conditional use permit process because it opens the door to dialogue. It doesn't mean it's going to be yes, but it allows for people to come in with their ideas and to, to be more productive in the conversation. And it also allows the Conservation Commission to be more involved in the process. And so that's the direction that I would recommend, because that's the direction that most communities are going now. And I'd be happy to give a summary of communities that we deal with that have gone that way and are going that way, if that's helpful, and certainly we're happy to help if there's questions, you know, as this moves forward, but. So, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Chad.
Thank you.
Garrett,
Adam, the town planner, just said in the Zoom chat, informational Swansea does not have a conditional use permit process yet.
it's something that Chad is suggesting would be a method to adopt. And have you been talking with Adam or Stefan about that, or?
I have not, I was going to reach out to them to talk to them about it, but that's a planning process, so that can be adopted by the planning board, and often that doesn't even have to go, you know, before the town for a warrant.
Doesn't?
Like regulations,
Yeah, because it's a change in the regulations.
Does that have to go through public hearing?
it does go through a public.
I think it would, but that's a process that can be, you know, can be worked. I just think it's a more productive and pro-development, you know, process, but I do plan on talking with Adam about it, and I'll try to do that tomorrow.
Yes, Garrett.
Adam said he wants to change it in 2025, and he's gonna present it to the planning board early this year.
Good lobbying, Chad. Right, well, yeah.
Good one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adam.
Did you just send Mike?
That along with impact fees are the two things we've been targeting coming up. Because we realized too, having talked with Adam, that we need to get ahead, like they were saying. We need to start early in the process instead of late in the process, so these things can be ironed out. Because it's always, when you try to write a regulation, we're doing what it gives now. If you would do them late, then there's all these problems pick up and people get mad. So if you get them ironed out then, and you could even have some, not necessarily public hearings, because they're gonna be done at the end of the year, but you can have informational meetings with people about this. Non-public, but public. By the way, all of our meetings are public meetings, not always public hearings, but public meetings, except for when we go into executive for legal issues like you guys do. That's only happened twice that I can think of in years. So we would be willing to work with the commission on that. We've always followed that. In fact, we changed one of our procedures to say we want Conservation Commission to weigh in on a project and give us comments before we even hear it. So that we have their input also.
Good idea.
And we do. You do, yes. And their information is usually very valuable. Good. It is.
So I was on the economic development advisory committee too, so I found out my term expired. Done that after.
It auto renews.
You're a holdover. Serve until someone else is appointed, so
Oh, gosh.
automatic 3 new years now.
A lost stop, we used to call it in the military. You think you're getting out, and then, no, you're not.
Automatic re-enlistment.
Anything else for Charlie? Any more in general?
What do you think there, young fella?
To me, how are the people supposed to get to those little pieces of property from the road? What are they gonna spend to get there? That's my big thing. You know, you want them to use this piece of property. What's it gonna cost them just to get to it?
Might not get permission, you'd have to get.
That's it.
It's a part of the process that they go through to determine if it's economically feasible.
370 some wetlands in Swansea?
Yeah,
That were identified in that report.
370 something?
something like that.
That were identified in that report, but his point was the amendment does not tie back to that 374. The amendment is wetlands.
Right.
So you got a wetland on your side of the property, I suspect. Where you got all your knotweed, that doesn't usually just grow.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so if that's determined to be a wetland, you can't hold much of your own.
I don't, they pull it out.
Yeah, Well, that's your method, but somebody else might feel differently. But anyway, so.
See that I get crashed by a car coming around the corner at 60 miles an hour.
Oh, you get that too?
It's funny, but now that I have this new route, it's really interesting to try to drive the speed limit with people, especially going from 30 to 20 or going from the 40 to the 30.
Ooh, on 32.
But
I go to house.
Yeah, 32.
That's a racetrack, that's the Indy 500.
I would even go by Mark's house on Lake Road. Yeah, there's people that they want to make that a speed
Yeah,
limit.
but when that knotweed is growing by my house,
Yeah.
you can't see who's coming south. And last summer, I almost got killed twice, because I start to pull out, and all of a sudden, where did you come from?
That stuff is hard to eradicate too.
Doesn't seem to like, you know,
We reduce this 3 ways.
I'm glad of it.
You need it. Oh, we're gonna save this one. Maybe anything else for. I think Charlie, I just would ask that you consider what we discussed and, Jim and Sly and I.
Yeah.
And our desire that this be continued through and looking out with them out for the 26th warrant. Just so that some of these issues that were brought up could be contemplated and dealt with. So just ask you to consider that when you're at the public hearing tomorrow night.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, Bill, I see him twice a week over at his place of employment, so
Whether you want or not.
I can chew on his ear a little bit.
Twice a week.
Yeah,
I throw it away.
that's a lot of cash.
Is he recycling?
No, I don't.
Close your lane, you see, I can go to the other one.
That's right.
You know, I like to see Charlie once a week.
Great. One more bite of the public input apple before we go into non-public. Bob?
At town hall, I noticed the back wall has been replaced, that all, yeah, who did that?
Santa.
Huh?
Santa.
Yeah,
You
okay,
mean the driveway of the fire station one?
yeah, the wall there, that,
Yeah, it
The
was
one that
part
was
of the,
broken?
yeah, the one that's broken, that's nice now. How
Yeah.
do they do
Oh,
that?
the retaining
Well, we
wall?
did it when we did the front, we figured why we had equipment there and everything. and
Okay,
saved
so,
some money.
so he did, okay.
Yeah, so we saved some money by doing that at the same time we did the front.
Now, was that part of the 54 grand, or is that a little bit more than
I think
that?
it was a separate, I think it was, it ended up being a little bit more, it was around 10,000.
10, so we're at about 64 where we were at.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. How much you got left in that expenditure?
On that expenditure, I think.
No, on the expendable trust, how much is left in that?
I don't have that handy, but we will have that at the budget hearing.
Okay, because maybe we need to put some more back into that.
The fire station one is pretty good, it's a pretty good amount, the town hall one, I think is pretty well completed.
Maybe need to put some into that.
And we still wanna do the back stairs,
Yeah,
back door. Eventually,
Yeah, we'll get you close on the keypad system.
right, keypad system,
Give them some codes.
it came out beautiful, nice job, everybody did it.
Yeah, keep it
We stopped the water problem by doing that, we dug down and fixed the foundation.
well, that river that was running underneath there, that's been
We
stopped.
sealed all that when they dug it all up, which that was another thing that we conquered. Wall, everything came out good, right?
Now, those, on the front entrance, you put new roof on there, gonna put some drains on those, like around the rest of the building.
I think they're gonna have to put a few gutters, but I think
Yeah.
we talked about the town, guys doing the shingles on that and save us some money too, right?
Oh, I see.
We were
Okay.
just gonna shingle it over, pull
Yeah,
that up.
shingle it and then put some,
Joe mentioned that he would help us with that, which is gonna be great.
yeah, either rain diverters or.
yeah, so they divert the
Yeah, because-
rain out on the front, yeah.
Yeah, one of them's gonna go right on the ramp.
Yeah.
But even the inside of the town hall, the doors, have you been in it and seen the new counters and the floor and the paint?
He comes to the town hall twice a week too, so.
Yeah, but that came out nice, and that was our guys that did that. That was our guys that did that, which was, it was nice. Yeah, they came in and then saved us a lot of money.
Hey, I'm retired, I got a chance to go around look at all this stuff.
No, that's right. I mean, you bring contractors to do that. We had the guys to do it and we had the time, so we did it. It really did good for the town.
Good job.
We were just discussing that in the last meeting.
Going in under.
A fee for hiring.
Yeah, that's it for public.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna make a motion. We go into non-public under B. Appreciate it. Be glad.
Fee for hiring.
Be glad.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Good. You can see it.
See you. Carol,
You know,
you
you're
know,
freezing out there? The wind, right? through that time.
It just, yeah.
Oh,
So, gotta put the mask on.
We're gonna get you a big blow up and give you a suit, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna get you a big blow up. You get a suit.
Thanks, Mark.
Mark,
Thanks, Mark.
Mark, where you going? On the back?
Yeah. Mark, well.
VIP packet, Mike? Boy.
It's free.
Yeah, that's.